When I took the assistant manager position at the old department store downtown, I was just happy to finally land a full-time job with benefits. Sure, the place was a bit worn down, but I figured they just hadn't invested in upgrades recently. On my first day, I met the store manager, Mr. Rhodes. He was an older man with a stern demeanor who ran the place on strict efficiency. After a brief orientation, Rhodes led me down to the cluttered basement that housed the store's inventory and archives. "You'll want to spend time familiarizing yourself with the stock we keep down here," he instructed, voice echoing off the concrete walls. As we walked by one particular metal door, I felt an odd chill, like a draft blowing from beneath it. Noticing my lingering gaze, Rhodes grabbed my arm. "That area is strictly prohibited to staff," he warned gravely. I nodded, shaken by his sudden intensity. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new position. The dilapidated store struggled to compete with the big chain retailers on the outskirts of town. Still, we had our loyal customers. At times, while working upstairs, I could hear odd noises rising from the basement below. Banging, scraping sounds that no one else seemed to notice. But whenever I went down to investigate, the basement was still and quiet. I tried asking my co-workers about the prohibited room, but they would only give vague warnings not to go near it. One stockboy did whisper that he heard moaning from behind that door late one night while retrieving inventory. "Old buildings make strange noises," I replied with a nervous laugh. That night, my dreams filled with distorted faces crying out from behind metal doors I couldn't open. Soon after, eerie events began plaguing the store when I worked late. Knocking and tapping on the walls, footsteps trailing me as I inspected aisles long after closing. Lights flickering wildly for no reason. Shelves found toppled over inexplicably. The episodes left me uneasy, but I did my best to explain them away. We were simply experiencing power issues and tremors caused by nearby construction. At least that's what I told myself. A big sale day came to draw in more customers. Unfortunately, we sold out of various popular products. "Check the basement," Mr. Rhodes ordered. "I want those shelves fully replenished." I headed down, moving through the maze of inventory shelves before arriving at the prohibited door. I considered ignoring it, but then heard faint scratching from within. Stealing my nerves, I grabbed the handle and was surprised to find it unlocked. A cold draft swept over me as I swung open the creaking door. I searched the walls for a light switch, finally turning on the single dangling bulb. It revealed a small windowless room in disarray, with filing cabinets overturned, papers strewn across the floor, claw marks scraping down the walls. My heart froze when I noticed a dark, reddish-brown stain pooled in the corner. Inching closer, I realized the stain was not rust, but dried blood. Scattered around it were clumps of long black hair. I gazed up at the mangled gashes in the concrete wall, as if something had tried desperately to escape this room. The awful revelation made me stagger back. What the hell had happened down here? Just then, the light bulb above flickered out, leaving me in pitch blackness. Frantically feeling my way to the door, I heard a whimper emerge from the dark. But when the bulb finally flashed back on, the room was empty once again. I fled and shut the metal door tight, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Upstairs, I considered confronting Rhodes, but held back. I had no real evidence beyond what I personally witnessed. Rhodes would surely deny everything, accuse me of hallucinating or rummaging where I wasn't allowed. I thought about going to the police instead, but how could they investigate a crime that left no apparent victim or proof besides my word? No, I needed to find out more before raising alarms. That night, I returned after the store closed, turning off the security cameras. Creeping down to the basement with a small crowbar, I approached the forbidden room again. The door was locked once more, but I managed to pry it open. The light bulb still dangled from the ceiling, now lifeless. I flipped the switch uselessly a few times before giving up. Holding my breath, I let the darkness envelop me. For several moments, only silence filled the cold room. Then, I began hearing them. Quiet whimpers and muted sobs emerged from unseen mouths, rising in intensity. I wanted to run, but held my ground. "What happened to you?" I whispered into the void. The voices stilled briefly. Then a young woman cried out full of anguish right next to me, making me cry out too. Suddenly, hands grabbed at my arms and clothes, pulling at me desperately. The painful grips felt all too real, not just some hallucination. I dropped the crowbar and tore myself from their grasp, fumbling blindly back through the doorway as my heart hammered against my ribs. I slammed the door shut, struggling to catch my breath. When I finally composed myself enough to head upstairs, a tall, shadowy figure stood by the doorway. I froze in terror until the warehouse lights illuminated the stern face of Mr. Rhodes. "What are you doing here?" he demanded coldly. I sputtered some excuse about checking inventory, but he cut me off. "Do not ever go in that room again. Now hand over your keys and get out." I left the store that night dazed, my mind swirling with questions. I returned over the next few days, asking Rhodes for my job back each time, begging him to tell me what he was hiding. His repeated refusals confirmed my worst fears. Something terrible had happened in that basement room, and Rhodes was complicit. On what would be my final night, I sat parked outside watching the store close. Once the last employee left, I approached the chained door wearing gloves to avoid prints. The crowbar made quick work of the lock. I crept inside and headed straight for the basement stairwell, turning on my flashlight. As I descended, the beam illuminated Rhodes standing at the foot of the stairs, his face twisted in anger. "Please, I need to know what you did," I cried. But Rhodes only shook his head and rushed at me. As he grabbed my arm, I lost my balance. I tumbled backward down the hard steps, my head cracking against the concrete floor. My vision went black as Rhodes's footsteps retreated. When I opened my eyes again, or at least thought I did, I seemed to float weightlessly off the ground. Panicked, I tried calling for help, but no sound left my lips. I looked down to see my own lifeless body sprawled at the base of the stairs, skull cracked and leaking crimson. Realization flooded in. I was trapped here now, another lost soul consigned to the basement's terrible secrets. Rhodes disposed of my body like all the others he lured to their doom. I watched powerless as new unwitting assistants are brought in, investigating the strange occurrences until Rhodes' rage kills them too. I try to warn them away, pounding on walls, causing lights to flicker. But the living cannot hear. How long before someone finally stops him? Until then, I will howl my wordless warnings, hoping one day they will be heard. My curiosity brought me to this fate. I should have trusted my instincts when they told me to run from this cursed place. But instead, I let my prying nature lead me straight to my own demise. Now there is no escape from the hellish confinement of these blood-stained basement walls, where I must dwell among the dead, pitifully trying to save the living from themselves.